This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness. I've already warned you that I don't edit. I just find, like, in this day and age where everything is kind of like hyper edited, people use AI to edit their videos to take out any kind of...
Oh, there's a thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
they take out any like ums and ahs and pauses. And so it's kind of me taking a stance against the dehumanization of the internet, and to have like real conversations where people are thinking on their feet and, you know, searching for the right words. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tom Cheetham, welcome back to the podcast. It's really great to have you back. The last time we spoke, we were speaking about James Hillman, specifically revisioning psychology and the impact that book had on you and your thinking. And I think you had to really restrain yourself from getting into Henry Corbin and Jung. And it seems to me like these three figures are so kind of intertwined for you in developing your own worldview and ideas. So I wanted to have you back so give you an opportunity to speak about that. And my initial thought was, well, let's use this book, Green Man, Earth Angel, that you wrote a number of years ago and that you've recently been teaching a class on. Let's use that as a way in. And then last week, I was saying before we started recording, you posted a video talking about these courses you're doing based on your own books, and that going over the material again, you spoke about how this is all part of a bigger project in the last half of your life in developing a psycho-cosmology. And I told you, like, that really pricked up my ears because that's a project I've quietly been working away on my own, is my own kind of personal, imaginal cosmology. And I found, like, I think it's really important that people have a cosmology that they develop. It's like, you know, when Jung talked about discovering what myth you're living, I think the cosmology is a big part of that, right? It's not just I'm living like a hero's journey or something, but like immersed in this greater cosmos. And so I thought it'd be really cool if we had a conversation about that, because it's not something I really hear people talking about, because I don't know, is it hubristic to come up with your own cosmology? Yeah. But like any cosmology that we've encountered is the product of someone's imagination. Exactly. And they're all different. So there's no one true cosmology. So why not have more? You know? Why not?
Yeah. No, that's really good. And gosh, I mean, yes, I guess I said that, you know, on the little video clip that I did. And yes, I am doing it. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, you're bringing to consciousness things that I'm perfectly conscious of, but you're making it public. And that's not a critique. It isn't a critique, because I've been telling my students the same thing recently, and so you're absolutely right. I am absolutely right. Only recently, in the last 2 months or so, have I started using my own books as texts for courses. And the reason for that is I didn't feel I had the authority to do it until recently, because, and here's the short version of this, which will make sense to some people. The books were written, I was not channeling anybody, but and I worked hard on them, but they were written To make a space for myself to move into. I was talking to Bernardo Kastrup several months ago, and we both had the same realization that our books had been written to make it acceptable for us to adopt the doctrines that were in them.
Hmm.
You know, because we're both sort of, crippled by intellect, and you just can't believe stupid shit, and so you have to, I at least, it took me decades to slowly begin to make myself into the sort of person who could take this stuff seriously.
Hmm.
This stuff being, in particular, Hillman. Hillman was relatively easy for me to move into when I was 38. um, Hillman has said last time was like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for all my life, without knowing it. Something big enough to hold the sciences and the humanities and all inside of something called the imagination. But then when Hillman pointed at Henry Corbin as the master of imagination, great. I'll jump right into creative imagination and the Sufism of Ibn Arabi. And oh no, it's about angels and the Quran and the Bible. And I don't do that shit. I mean, that's, God, I can't know. And yet Hillman said he's the guy. And so I kept going back and forth and back and forth. Long story, a decades long story. But that was the same sort of resistance. You got all these priors, when you get educated. Um, and explicitly or not, there's just things that we don't think about. And I don't care what you could be a crazy person and think, oh, I don't do physics, and that could be your, oh no, no, I don't, so it could be anything. We're all finite. And and yet, um, it was it is clear to me in retrospect that I was being led into this world. And so, cut to the
Well,
chase.
just to pause there. So the
Yeah,
thing that you had resistance to is religious dogma, doctrine.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Sure. I mean, as an undergraduate, I was a philosophy major, and the philosophy department and the religions department have almost nothing to do with each other. I was not raised in any religious tradition, and so in the '60s, I mean, Christianity and Islam, they're patriarchal, they're repressive, they're horrible, all that baggage, the stuff that the '60s was trying to escape from, right? And so Hillman was fantastic, but he doesn't give you access to the explicitly religious imagination, or at least he didn't me. And so for that, it had to be Corbin. But I mean, sure, explicitly had to discover for myself that, oh, all these religious people over the centuries, and pick your favorite religion. I mean, in Corbin's case, we're talking about Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Those are the ones that he's focused on. And I had to very slowly be dragged into seeing that, there's really probably something here. There's thousands of years of tradition, and it would be a mistake to just say they're all a bunch of patriarchs and, repressive people. And Corbin, of course, is all about the other side of those religions.
Hmm.
He's an anti-institutionalist and a free thinker. Anyway,
Hmm.
what I was to get back to the subject here, um, what I was exploring without being terribly clear about it was a way to enter Corbin's world and to see how it intersected with the world of Hillman and Jung, particularly. I mean, there were a lot of other figures floating around, but those were the three big ones for me at the time. And one of the ways, okay, so one of Corbin's terms is psycho-cosmology. He uses that explicitly. And that's a handy term to have because it suggests that he's trying to start at a place where the distinction between the psyche and everything outside the psyche is at least problematized, if not in fact obliterated. So you can't have a cosmology and a psychology. That's not the world that he's proposing we move into. His world is simultaneously both. And you see Jung struggling with that all the time. And for Hillman, I don't think Hillman struggles very much because he doesn't give a damn about scientific cosmology, you know. But I don't know that Hillman uses that term, but Corbin does.
Well, he would talk about metaphysics. He didn't want to deal with metaphysics, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have these distinctions between, well, say, I mean, we have all the disciplines in universities. You know, you got religion studies, and if you go to the right university, you have theology, you know, if you go to Notre Dame or someplace. And then you've got philosophy, and then you've got the sciences, and they're all kind of neatly broken out. And it took hundreds of years to do that, and there's good reasons to do that sort of thing. But Corbin's coming from like 12th century Persia, you know, and they didn't do that. You know, I mean, Avicenna was a physician and an astronomer and a mathematician and a theologian and I mean, they didn't make those distinctions because it was all God's world. And, you know, I mean, they had parts, but they weren't broken into separate disciplines. And there's there are downsides to that for sure. But there's also there's things that get lost when you abandon that some sense of the unity of things. And from Corbin's point of view, one of the most important things that got lost was the imagination. So he focuses on that as a way to remedy the schisms which split the West between science and poetry and imagination and rationality and all those things, you know. Anyway, so I began to realize, I mean, I'm just sort of post hoc theorizing, but that what I was trying to do was it became clear to me eventually that what I was trying to do was to move into a psycho-cosmology, to move into an entire world. And one of the ways that became clear to me was that from outside of Corbin's universe, from the point of view of the person I was in 1990, which is, you know, trained in the sciences, trained in philosophy, suddenly struck by Hillman and the imagination, moving into Corbin's world was really hard because, and I've been thinking a lot about this, it sort of requires that you let go of everything that you think you know, which is a wonderful thing, I have to say. But one of the things that I guess I still think this is true, in order to move into Corbin's world, it comes all at once or not at all.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's one of the difficulties for me getting into him. It's like I have to take it all as a whole. I can't just pluck out his idea of the mundus imaginalis and go, that's cool, I'll bring that in, because it all comes together and it's all, yeah.
Yeah, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, it took a while, but now that's definitely, I think, what I was struggling with. And as I began to teach Corbin's works more and more, or particularly over the last 7 or 8 years, it became pretty clear that no, you gotta do it all at once, or you're not going to get it. And so one way to talk about that is to talk about his psycho-cosmology as a whole, right? And so here come the questions with that. I mean, I for a long time that was pretty clearly what I was trying to do, was trying to bring myself into Corbin's ways of thinking so that I could see what he was seeing from where he was standing,
Mhm.
but still be me. And after a while, this is partly true, I suppose, but it's a good story. After a while, you sort of look around when you're in there and you think, this is really nice. I like it here, you know, but there's things about it that are never going to be mine. You know,
Mhm.
I'm never, I tried really hard. Well, or at least it was presented to me as a potential option to become a Christian. And I thought that might happen, and then no, it didn't happen. And Corbin was a Christian, though a peculiar one, a post-Islamic Christian. And yeah, no, so it wasn't as if, and it wasn't as if I was going to adopt all of Corbin's ideas, and he would not want me to, because your relationship with the divine is yours. He shares with Jung the feeling that your encounter with the divine is individual and individuating. So he would say, I can't tell you what to. And so, especially quite recently, I realized I need my own psycho-cosmology. And so we have, since you're working on one too, we have good reason to think that this is okay. We have permission. I mean, I don't know where he says it, and maybe it's not something he said, but I think it is. Jung says somewhere, I'm the only Jungian. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, I don't know what you guys are all doing. And Hillman echoes that, and he says, maybe I don't remember if this is Jung or Hillman speaking, saying if you want a psychology, make your own, for heaven's sakes. I mean,
Yeah.
Hillman says somewhere, all I'm really doing is making a psychology that justifies my own pure personality.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
and he said that, that's what Jung did as well, and that
yeah.
every psychologist should have their own psychological approach or frameworks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Corbin, I grabbed it before we came on here. I mean, Corbin says very much the same thing. Uh, this is at the beginning of his book on Avicenna. How much of this we need, I'm not quite sure. Um, so he's discussing the mismatch between Avicenna's cosmology, from the medieval cosmology of Avicenna, and the modern world, and that how could you have both of those things together? I mean, what do you do when the cosmologies conflict? um now, these recitals, the Avicennan stories that he's interested in, show us his universe not as an abstract magnitude transcended by our modern conceptions, but as the repository of the image that the man Avicenna carried in himself, as each of us also carries our own. And then he says, each of us carries the image of our own world, our imago mundi,
Hmm.
and projects it into a more or less coherent universe, which becomes the stage on which our destiny is played out. and at some point he says, usually you don't become conscious of it. You think,
Hmm.
um, uh, uh, you think, say you're Hegel, you know, and you think, oh man, I've been doing this objective philosophy, and I finally have established the truth. If you go the next stage, if you are able to then experience what Corbin calls the rupture of the plane, you realize, oh, oh shit, that was just me.
Yeah.
And you turn around and you think, wow, wow, okay, yeah, that was me. And at that moment, I mean, you transcend your false objectivity, you awaken to yourself, and then you're kind of free. And it's
Yeah.
not that what you saw and laid out was wrong and to be jettisoned. You just realize, like Jung did with the Red Book,
It's
it's like,
personal. Yeah.
oh, this is the most personal journey. And then magically, you've come to yourself, the world lightens up around you, and you have your truth, but you also have no sense that you have to tell it to other people and
Yeah.
impose it upon them.
Yeah. And if you feel that urge, you're probably caught up in an inflation. Yeah. And it's like the way I've been thinking about it, it's like it's a small t truth. It's like my truth and it's provisional, and I'm reluctant to tell other people or write it down because it seems like it's always in the process of being created and kind of
Mhm.
updated and revised. And so there's a
Mhm.
sense of like playfulness that comes with that
Oh, that's
breakthrough
beautiful.
that you're talking about. It's like ontological play. And the way
Yes.
that I think, like it's okay because why wouldn't my own worldview, that imago mundi, why wouldn't that just be like another reflection of the divine coming through me with everything that my soul carries into this incarnation? Of course, it's going to look different than everybody else's. And we're in such a unique time, having exposure to all the global cosmologies
Yeah.
and religions.
Right.
So to me, it's just like the kind of the fractal of the person. It's becoming even more
Mhm.
kind of differentiated, and I don't know. I'm reaching for something there, but you get what I'm kind
Oh
of putting
yeah.
out.
No, no, I know. I think that's absolutely right. And focus on a number of things. The fractal is great, and also that it is playful. As yeah, I mean, and Nietzsche of all people, but he's a good guy, really.
He's all
um,
right.
yeah, he's all right. He says, what the somewhere he says in one of his aphorisms that the maturity of a man is to recapture the seriousness of a child at play. I like that a lot.
Hmm. I never heard that
um,
one.
the seriousness of a child at play. There has to be, I mean, all of the arts, as serious as they can be, I mean, it's play. You're
Yeah.
walking around with some pigment. I mean, what are you doing? What are you kind of serious? It's no, it's play.
Well, I think
And
like with the way I'm hearing serious there is we give it value.
yeah,
Like we take it seriously, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean
yeah.
that cold and rational and all of that and like intellectual
Oh, no,
rigor.
no.
But no,
Yes.
we ascribe it value, or we see
Yeah.
the value in it.
Yeah. No, because it's the most meaningful thing. It has,
Yeah,
it's
crazy,
just,
right?
yeah, it's just crazy meaningful
Well, it
to
was like
you
when
in the
Jung was
moment.
having his breakdown,
Yeah.
realizing his own kind of lack of soul or disconnection from his soul. The first thing he did is he went down to the lakefront and started building sandcastles
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the great man, the old wise one,
That's
And
exactly,
everything kind of grew out of that, building
yeah.
his own tower and taking it further. And
Jung was really something. You know, he really, really was. And his story, his story is sort of the archetypal conflict between modernity and the rational, and stuff that he knew was more important. And both of those things are visible in his work at every point. And so Hillman and Jung and Corbin give us permission to try to articulate, as you say, a provisional psycho-cosmology. That's the term that I like. Um, it's a myth that would work too.
mhm,
Um, And the one of the other important things that you said was it is provisional, and this reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I don't know very well at all. He says where religions go off wrong is they take their symbols too seriously. He says you have to hold your symbol very lightly,
mhm,
so you get whatever is most, whatever that is, that's the centerpiece of your myth, and don't grab it because it's going to change, or at least it certainly should. And
mm,
if it doesn't, then everything will die. And this feeds into one of the images, one of the ideas that I think is the coolest in Corbin, which he says comes from the Zoroastrians, of whom he was very fond. And the story is that Corbin's mystical master, if you will, was Shuravarti, the 12th, 11th century Persian mystic whose works he studied for years and years. And he as much as says that Shuravarti was my master. And Shuravarti, as a Persian Islamic mystic, was really interested in showing that the Zoroastrians, the pre-existing pre-Islamic religion of Persia, that Zoroastrianism was really, fit nicely into the Islamic fold. And so Corbin in his own work was trying to do something similar for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam to show what he called the Harmonia Abrahamica. So the Zoroastrians were really important for Corbin, and he talks about their mythologies at the beginning of his life and then at the end and all through. And the coolest story that he tells is that every being of light has an angel. So human beings and plants and every being of light has an angel because each being is both manifest in the created world and then unmanifest in the world of the divinity, and that so you really are a dualitude if you're a human being or a plant or any of the other beings of light. And so there's always this angel, and one of the ways to conceive of the angel is that the angel is what the connection to the angel, if it's well established, orients you. You can't, otherwise you're disoriented, which is bad because you don't know which direction you're heading or what you're supposed to do. But if you've oriented yourself with regard to your individual angel, things are good. Well, the angel is also sort of keeping you in perpetual motion in the best possible circumstance because you're both moving upward. It's very hierarchical. It's very sort of traditionally medieval. The angels are up there, and we're kind of moving upwards, ideally, as we purify our souls and get closer to the divine. So but the angel's always ahead of you. So there's the idea of what he calls the angel out ahead. So every being has an angel out ahead, and that kind of keeps you from freezing because if because it's if your cosmology has that as its fundamental structure, it's a kind of energetics, you know, and so it's quite clear in your experience of your own reality that there's always more to come. You are never going to get to the place where you think, aha, now I'm perfect.
Mhm.
Now I'm great. It's it's
I'm
like,
done. Yeah.
yeah, I'm done. It's the anti-inflationary,
Mm.
it's like, oh no, there's always somebody, that angel out ahead. The coolest thing is that every being of light has an angel out ahead, even the supreme being.
Huh.
Even Ormazd, the great creator, has an angel out ahead because otherwise, look what would happen. He'd think, I'm God after all. I'm perfect. And everything would just freeze solid, and it would be over. and,
Yeah.
and Corbin says, no, it doesn't work that way. There's always, so it's a, I mean, it's a mythology which is built on the idea of fluidity and motion and discovery.
Hmm.
And somewhere the Russian Orthodox theologian Olivier Clément, um, he says that heaven is a series of first times extended to infinity, like the first time you saw a baby smile, the first time you fell in love. This is that.
Mm.
This is oh, and you're always so there's always more.
Hmm.
There's no sense of oh, I'm going to die and get to heaven and everything's going to be great.
Yeah.
It's just none of that in Corbin's
Yeah. This
psycho-cosmology.
idea in our culture that when we die, we check out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's over. I mean, sometimes you certainly think, yeah, that would be good.
I've had
you know,
enough.
enough after all. Yeah, but oh, and well, I mean
Hmm.
that
Well,
raises
I just,
a number of
yeah.
questions. But yeah,
What it was kind of reminding me of, I think it was Octavia Butler who said God is change.
yes. Yes, I have not read Octavia Butler, but yes, I have read that little
Yeah,
section.
I think it was her, but I
Yeah,
mean, that really rhymes with that too, you know? And that even God is changing.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
like when Jung went into his, answer to Job, he talked about how Job was helping God to individuate in a way, right? By
yeah,
challenging him. And
yeah, yeah.
so Jung was reaching for that kind of cosmology too, I think.
And I mean, one of the virtues for me of that has to do with my own personal psychology, which is not surprising, and also perfectly legitimate to talk about, because anyone listening to me should be able to know where I'm coming from and be able to say, oh, no wonder I think he's crazy because my experience of life isn't like that at all. But in my little personal mythology, my mother and my father were both. They were neither one of them was religious at all, but they were both fundamentalists in radically different ways. They were each certain of certain kinds of things. And so I'm someone who's very allergic to that.
Hmm.
It's why I loved Hillman, and it's why I liked Corbin so much, you
Hmm.
know, because they're both very anti-fundamentalist. And and fluid
Mm-hmm.
and provisional. The way science is supposed to be. Science
Supposed to
is,
be, yeah.
yeah, I mean, and look, I've done science. I
It's all
mean,
a hypothesis. It's all,
not in any great way, but it's supposed to be hypothetical.
yeah. When I think it was, when Plato related the myth of Ur that Hillman uses as the kind of central idea or story of the soul's code, didn't he say, like, didn't he present it as a likely story?
Yeah, yes,
Which is so
yeah,
great. That's that provisionality, right? It's like, it just seems like this could be it seems like a likely story to me from where I sit.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that I, one of the fundamental um, features of my life story and the psycho-cosmology that I'm apparently assembling, consciously or not, is that it it has to allow me to see quite clearly the limitations and restrictions and fundamental characteristics of the modern of not that there's one, but of the modern rational worldview that I got infused with over the course of decades of education. Myths are out. Plato's a smart guy, but that mythology shit, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's like stories for children. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's uh, um, and but it turns out I think I see more clearly now than in the past how deeply embedded some really fundamental assumptions about reality are in most of us, certainly in me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why it took decades to move slowly to a place where Corbin's universe seems like totally reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
you know and and it's a constant. So to finish that thought, it's not really Corbin's universe that I'm inhabiting because I'm not Corbin. I'm me. I'm a guy who lives in rural Maine and spent decades reading Corbin. And so it's only recently where I've thought, I need to be explicit about what my assumptions now are, filtered through Corbin. And so I'm, I guess, working on my own vision of reality that you then kind of want to only jot down.
Yeah, sketch
You-
out.
yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of want to sketch it out because you know better than anyone how little you know.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be
Yeah,
really careful that people don't think you know what you're talking about.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, like the sketching out part is a way of kind of testing it against reality. It's like, okay, well, I had this notion, or like for me, the cosmology, the big broad strokes of it came like one morning. I woke up and I was like, holy shit, this showed up on my doorstep today, just like an Amazon package. And it's like, wait, okay, I got to test this out, see if it vibes with my experience of reality and everything that I've heard from other philosophers and,
Yeah.
religious traditions and everything. And it's like, it kind of rhymes with a lot of them. It's kind of Platonic, but it's a little different. But what it does actually, and I love these questions that Hillman would always ask. And, he was a great one at pointing out that we're all living within a myth.
Mm.
So once you wake up to that, then you can start to become more ontologically playful, or I think of it as a radical ambivalence about the nature of reality.
Oh, that's lovely. I like that. Radical ambivalence. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's a term that came out of my study of Hillman. Is like that's what his tantra is is pushing us toward, is a radical ambivalence,
Yeah.
and like kind of finding a new foundation in the kind of the cosmos, in the void, or not on some kind of stated, inscribed in stone truth about the way it all is.
Yeah. And that radical ambivalence, it sounds to some ears, and maybe including mine from time to time, as a pretty uncomfortable place to be.
For the ego.
Yeah, yeah, for me.
Yeah.
How do you live with radical ambivalence? And and what is required to be able to live there fairly comfortably? And one thing is you've just got to stop looking for truth.
Like one
And
truth.
some you know uh,
Yeah, the radical anti-guru, UG Krishnamurti, not J Krishnamurti, the guy who'd had a bunch of answers, but UG would always say, people would come to him like, "What do you say about this? It says this in the Vedas and blah 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 blah," and he'd say, the seeking is the problem that you're trying to find your way out of with all of these prescribed solutions or doctrines, whatever it is. But the seeking itself is the problem. Like the seeking for that one truth that's going to explain everything for me. And
yeah,
I think there's some real truth in that.
that echoes nicely for me because I mean, look, one of the reasons that I do what I do is because I'm still seeking.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's make a distinction here
Yeah.
between
What we're seeking for is
yeah,
important. Yeah.
two kinds of seeking. One is the seeking for a permanent place of rest, you know. This gets complicated so
Well,
fast.
let me try it because I'm vibing with you here. Like there is the seeking for the one place of rest, of certainty, of the one truth. And then there's the seeking out of like curiosity. Like for me, it's like seeking out more stories because it makes the world more rich and kind of infuses my own worldview with more richness and depth and complexity. And that to me, that's the beauty of this world.
The the quote which I should have on my desk here, which I think I can quote from Hillman, the best thing that James Hillman ever said for me. I didn't notice it. It's in Dream in the Underworld, which I think I read two or three times, but I didn't ever notice it until the last time I read it. I was preparing for a class over at the College of the Atlantic some years ago now, maybe 15 years ago. And I was just zipping through it and bong, there it was. And this is the quote about what he calls in that context the loving that we give to images in dreams. The immediate context in his book is you've got these two people, the therapist and the analyst Sand, or whatever you want to call it. You get the two people. My friend Nicholas Pearson calls them the fellow travelers, which I like very much. So you got the two fellow travelers, and they're talking about a dream. And Hillman says there's a kind of loving in dream work. And he says, let us call it imaginal loving. At which point, I want to drag that out of its Hillmanian context and generalize it, as Hillman would do, as Jung would do, because everything is an image. Okay, so let's imagine a loving. He says it's not seeking for union or stability as we are so tediously taught. The kind of loving that's appropriate to images allows us to explore more and more widely, to extend the intricacy that intensifies intimacy. Ah,
Boom. Oh, I got the chills.
boom.
That's it. That's
That's
it.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the distinction in kind of types of seeking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read that. I hit on that, whatever it was, and that gave the title to my last book, Imagine Love, because
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. To explore more and more widely, to extend the intricacy that intensifies intimacy.
Oh,
Um,
it's great. It's so
that's
good.
pretty much the whole thing for me.
Yeah. Like, what are we
And
here
so
for? That.
my psycho-cosmology is an attempt to envision the kinds of counter technologies or technologies of the sacred, if you want to borrow from Jerome Rothenberg, that follow from that vision of reality. And there are
Hmm.
going to be lots and lots and lots of them. And so the shortest possible version of my psychocosmology is, and the hardest part, you take everything that you learned in college. Let's just stick with the sciences, right? And let's just be me, and we'll stick with physics and biology, and all the things that you learned that you, by God, know are true in some sense. I mean, I could teach that stuff and be very persuasive because it's wonderful and it's fantastic and it's well nigh infinite. Geology and cell biology and I mean, it's just the greatest thing. You take all of that and you put it in a little compartment inside the mundus imaginalis. And that leaves everything else. I mean, it overlaps with everything else because what you begin to realize is that all of these other faculties, besides the rational one that you pretend you're using when you're doing sciences, there's
Pretend. Yeah.
all these other faculties are operative. It's just that when you do your dissertation, you can't talk about them. Footnote, right? So I wrote my dissertation. We don't have to talk about it. And in the text of the dissertation, I said that something was extremely interesting, and my committee said you can't say that. And I said, well, why not? He said, your reader might not find it interesting.
Right. It's so subjective.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine, I'll take it out. I mean, that's a great example of the kind of,
Yeah.
bullshit nonsense.
Yeah. The
And
illusion of
so,
objectivity. Yeah.
yeah, and for someone who was raised and studied philosophy and did science and all the, to be able to do that, put that aside and put it into this bigger, that's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just like a kind of a move of the mind to think that you're putting it inside the larger thing because it's already a part of it. It's already a product of some larger cosmos. And so, how could it possibly encapsulate the thing it's within? It can only reflect it in a limited way. But that's a cosmic vision, right? Or
It is. It is. Case in point, I worry. It took me so long to crawl out of the fundamental assumptions that are part of the scientific worldview. The primary one being that we can understand the world.
hmm,
That's If you're not willing to give that one up, then the rest of this makes no sense.
hmm,
You have to begin with something akin although you don't have to be this extreme, but if Corbin calls it mystical poverty, you have to
Hmm.
begin thinking, man, this is a lot. I can't possibly understand it all. And that's where most people were for most of human
Yeah.
history until, I don't know, sometime in the early modern period, people, guys with mathematics and things started to think, yeah, we can totally understand this because our minds have been given by God and we can, and whatever happened. And we got to the point where, well, of course we can understand the world. Of course we can. Look what we can do, right?
Yeah.
It, man, you've got to get that out of your head. And I worry that because I had such trouble seeing that, I, I'm really sensitive to the fact that many people will have similar problems. Okay.
Mm.
And so I, because I'm interested in these things and because all hell is breaking loose, I've been paying a lot of attention to the debates about artificial intelligence. Um, and in my version of reality, this is one place where the two worlds collide. 30 years ago, when we set up the program in environmental studies at our little tiny college, 35 years ago, I used to I used to use two texts as sort of archetypal examples of this kind of conflict. One was a book by a guy whose name I forget, called Goat Walking, and he was a goat herder on the Mexico-Texas border, as I recall, and he was highly intellectual, and he wrote a book about goat walking, and it was kind of an echo of the Old Testament. I'm not sure that he was Christian. I think probably he wasn't, but his vision of humanity was in that mode, the pastoral, nomadic herder. And he was, I remember the book being quite affecting.
Right. Jesus, the shepherd of men, and all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff,
all,
right?
all that stuff about this is how you be maximally human in the world. You
And
know,
that's
you
kind of like the myth of human as steward of the world,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Oh, it's beautiful like that. Wendell Berry, if people still know Wendell Berry's writings, or Gary Snyder,
Hmm.
that kind of vision of what makes a human human. And then the other thing I used to assign was Marvin Minsky's little essay, Will Robots Inherit the Earth? And Minsky was at MIT. He was the head of the whatever they called it lab at MIT back in the 60s and 70s. And he was proposing that the obvious, destiny of humans was to download your intellect into a computer and take off for the stars. And I set these two, next to each other for my students, just to sort of, make that point that there
Hmm.
are options here. There are different ways of conceiving of what it means to be human. And of course, it's Minsky is the precursor to Elon Musk and all
Yeah,
these
Kurzweil
crazies.
and yeah,
Yeah,
all the
yeah, all of them,
transhumanists.
all of
Yeah.
them. And
Hmm.
then just I let me get this off my chest. And then I was at Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico in 1990 for the first complex systems summer school, which was really cool. Um, and the second year I was there, or the third, during the summer, they had the first uh, artificial life conference. And in the moment, I can't remember his name, but one of the presenters. did a presentation called Artificial Life, not computer, because he was talking more than computers, but Artificial Life, the Coming Evolution. And he's just echoing Musk and these people. This was in 1992, maybe. And he said, look, eventually we're going to figure out how to do this. We're going to make artificial life. It's going to develop on its own. We'll give it some stuff. It will drive us extinct, and it will take off for the stars. And he thought this was just, it will be our children. And this was just the greatest thing. And at the time, decades ago, at least half of the audience thought, "Oh shit," and now here it is. Yeah. And so I've been primed for this for decades. And yesterday I was listening to Chris Hayes. Why is this happening? And Chris was. And let me finish my little rant here. And Chris Hayes, the nightly news guy, I guess, although I don't have TV. He was trained in philosophy. I forget where he went, but he knows philosophy. And he was interviewing a guy whose name I forget, who just wrote a long article for the New Yorker about the AI gang in San, out on the coast. And I like Chris Hayes. He's really smart, but he was voicing the exact reductive Darwinian vision of humanity that it has taken me decades to escape. And I just wanted to kind of shake him and say, no, don't be a reductive materialist, which is exactly what he said he is. And I just thought, the point I'm trying to make is that there's an awful lot of people for whom the psycho-cosmology of the sort that you and I are trying to articulate is just total nonsense. It's just absurd, because we know all these things from science. We just know them. And I've been over there, and I know what that feels like. What's the point of this? The point of it for me is part of the point of it for me is to recognize the radical nature of what you and I are proposing from the point of view of that part of the modern culture.
Yeah, I always come back to these two questions that Hillman would ask, after he would point out that everyone is living a myth, whether that's the myth of developmental psychology, the myth of scientism, the myth of Christianity, the myth of transhumanism. You're living a myth. Okay, once you've got that, then you can ask yourself these two questions. What does it do for you? And what does it do to you? And I think that's a great way to kind of test the myth that you hold so true. To watch or listen to the full episode, become a free or paid member by visiting patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness, or by downloading the Patreon app to your mobile device. Paid memberships start at just $5 a month and offer a number of benefits, including early access to all episodes, the full podcast archives, and the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting an independent creator directly. Thanks.